In October of 1997, Microsoft released Ensemble Studios' new video game, Age of Empires. By today's standards, it is clunky and rough, but back in the day, it was a visual and technological masterpiece. 20 years later, after several more successful installments into the franchise, Microsoft announced that they would celebrate its 20th anniversary with a remastered edition, featuring 4K graphics, new gameplay updates, and new music. However, because of development backlogs, the game was delayed until February of 2018. However, this new date is still the 20th anniversary of the game's original release in the United Kingdom. This is Age of Empires Definitive Edition, and welcome to my review of this game. Now, before I start the review, I would like to point out that many of my opinions are formed because of my experience beta testing this game. However, I've made sure that anything I say in this video lines up to the release version of that game. And so, if there's a new addition in the release version that was not in the beta version, that new feature will still be considered. And so, let's start off by looking at the visuals and sound design of this remaster. Now, when it comes to video game remasters, there are generally two different types. The first type maybe gives it widescreen and increases the resolution, but doesn't really do anything big to the visuals of the game. Age of Empires 2 HD Edition. However, the second type of remaster, which this game is actually the poster child of, they absolutely completely revamp and recreate all the graphics to make it look as stunning as possible. And Age of Empires 1 Definitive Edition has succeeded massively in doing this. All the new textures still hold the same feel as the originals, whilst including an amazing array of new detail. You might be surprised to learn that this game actually still runs on basically the same game engine that the original runs on. In other words, this game is still a two-dimensional game. However, by increasing texture detail and giving all the units new rotational angles, they have made the game look far smoother than the original. With the new textures comes two new zoom options. In the first zoom option, if you press and hold Control while spinning the scroll wheel, you will get closer or further away, so to speak, from the textures. However, keep in mind that if you do this, you won't actually be increasing the detail of the texture, you'll instead just be making the textures being displayed at a slightly higher resolution. In other words, this is basically the same thing as just increasing or decreasing your resolution like you would have to with Age of Empires 2 or the original version of Age of Empires 1. On the other hand, the second zoom option actually comes in the form of several zoom levels that you can find in the options menu. What these zoom levels do is they actually replace the textures with more high-definition ones, thereby increasing the unit and building detail, but making your view of the battlefield smaller. The sound design of the game has also been updated to sound more full and rich. Also, the music of the game has been completely reorchestrated in order to make it feel like it belongs with the new updated graphics. I, for one, am a big fan of the new orchestrated music. I do like the originals a whole lot, but I think that the new music works really well with the new updated look of the game. All things considered, I'd have to give this part of the review a 9 out of 10. The only drawback of the graphics is that some of the player colors are difficult to tell apart. For the next section of this review, I'm going to look at the gameplay of this remaster to see if it really is updated from the original. Microsoft has claimed that this game would have enhanced pathfinding, or in other words, when you tell a large group of units to go somewhere, they'll actually obey your command instead of stuttering around and failing to get to the destination. The reality is that while the pathfinding is probably better than it was in the original game, it's really not consistently decent. I think that a large reason for this is that this game does not utilize formations unlike Age of Empires 2. With formations, units know where to put themselves relative to other units, so it helps that out, and like the formations in Age of Empires 2, units can oftentimes walk over each other or get into each other's hitboxes in order to get to the destination in a more efficient manner. I think the lack of formations in this game is a significant factor as to why pathing is still pretty bad. While we are on the subject of units disobeying your orders, let's talk about lag. If you read online, you'll find many posts about people complaining about the game being super laggy, or unplayable, or even worse than Age of Empires 2 HD. In my experience, while there are times where the game won't even start, and sometimes the game will just stop working after about 5 minutes of play, I think that the reality is that lag is a feature of every multiplayer game. In my experience, just make sure that the pings of everyone you're playing with is actually pretty good, or if you have a strong enough computer, actually start the game as a dedicated server in which you actually host the game. Also, while my computer doesn't even meet the recommended requirements, it just barely meets the minimum requirements of the game, 1 vs 1 matches were very rarely laggy, and lag was non-existent in single-player matches. That is my own experience, but take from it what you will. Despite these technical problems, I really am a fan of this game's gameplay features. You have the classic, easy to learn yet difficult to master gameplay features of the original, including unique civilizations, micromanagement of your army, macro-management of your economy, and a broad tech tree. The inclusion of different game modes, from random match to deathmatch to nomad start, to single player, to campaigns, to scenario editor, as well as a classic gameplay mode with which you can actually play with all the original textures, means that this game has something for everybody. Among the new gameplay features, we have, first, Attack Move. Attack Move is basically when you tell your units to move to a position, but instead they will attack all opponents on their path to that position. What this does is it allows you to actually get into battle a lot smoother because all your units are not zoned in upon one enemy, but instead upon a group of enemies. The lackluster unit pathing sometimes negates any bonuses you'll get from Attack Move, but there are many times where I have noticed that it has worked properly. Also, a much needed addition is the inclusion of smart villagers that will start to collect resources once they have finished building an economic drop-off point. On the one hand, this does technically work, but on the other hand, villagers stop working for almost no apparent reason, and you still need quite a large amount of micromanagement of your economy. All in all, in this game's current state, I'd have to give its gameplay features a 7 out of 10, because it really is held back by some of these technical problems. The last thing to look at would be quality of life features. These are little things that don't quite count as gameplay features, but they really do help the customization and the user-friendliness of the game. Now, to start this section, I'm going to be talking about a major gripe I have with this game, and that is that the lobby really is not an improvement of Age of Empires 2 HD Edition's lobby. So let's break it down. When you're finished with a game, you are not returned to a game room that has all the same players that you just played with. Instead, you are returned to the lobby browser screen, and from there, you hope that if you join or create a game, everyone that you just played with will join that game. Also, there are 2 major problems when it comes to spectating. The first problem is that you can only spectate games if you join the game room before the game starts. In other words, you cannot spectate a game that has already started. Another major problem is that spectators are actually considered players by the game. This means that if a spectator is lagging, the game will lag for everybody else. It also means that you can only spectate games if there are not 8 players playing, because a slot that would normally be occupied by a player actually gets taken over by a spectator. Now, having said this about the lobby system, the reality is that if you've played Age of Empires 2 HD Edition on Steam, you're already used to this type of situation. And if you're fine with it on Steam, you'll be fine with it for the Definitive Edition. Yes, these features on Voobly have definitely helped the competitive and the professional scene to grow for Age of Empires 2, but the reality is that for casual players, the lack of these features is not going to be significant at all. On the other hand, the in-game quality of life new additions are very welcome. The first one would be an in-game tech tree. Now, if you played the original, you will remember that if you actually wanted to figure out what your civilization was good at, you would have to consult your game manual if you were lucky enough to have one of these. If you didn't, you would have to consult this newfangled thing called the internet in order to find out information about your civilization. However, as expected, the Definitive Edition adds a beautiful new tech tree that allows you to see what your civilization will excel in. Another very important addition is the ability to use your scroll wheel to scroll in. This is important because if you need to micro your villagers, you can zoom in real close, but if you want to have a large picture of the battlefield, you can do that too. Also, unlike Age of Empires 2, you have the ability to adjust the size of the user interface independently from whatever zoom level you have your game set at. What this means is that if you have a 4K screen and you want to have that sweet resolution, you won't have to deal with the problem of your user interface being too small. It also means that if you're like me and have a rather smaller screen, you can zoom out with your user interface. That way you can still have a better view of the battlefield. This is probably my favorite quality of life feature, right next to the fact that hotkeys have been simplified. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner of your game, you'll notice a grid of very important options. You should also notice that this grid directly aligns with the letters on your keyboard, and what this means is that it's a lot easier to learn and therefore use hotkeys in this game because of this grid system. Also, if you compare this grid to the grid of Age of Empires 2, you will notice that this one is a bit bigger. That's because in Age of Empires 2, the smaller grid means that you have to use 2 different keystrokes in order to select a building in the Villager Build menu. However, in this Definitive Edition, you only need to press 1 keystroke, which means that if you accidentally press the wrong key, it's no big deal, just press the right one. To be completely honest, while I really do like the new additions and quality of life features they have added to this game, it's still held back by its somewhat stupid lobby system, and as such, I can only give it an 8 out of 10 for quality of life features. But wait! Isn't this game exclusive to the Windows 10 store? Doesn't that mean that it is on the worst platform in the history of video gaming, and as such, it is probably the worst game of 2018? Well, no. Many people have had very bad experiences with the Windows 10 store because it's not the most user-friendly platform or the best network necessarily. However, my opinion is that if you already have the Windows 10 operating system, it's really not that difficult to get the game. Just go to the store and then download the game from there. Also, many people are of the opinion that because this game is played via Xbox Live, it's going to be a bad network. But I would like to point out that the same thing was pretty much true for Steam. Age of Empires 2 HD Edition. And if anything, the fact that Microsoft actually wants this on their own platform means that they care more about this game than they would if it was on Steam or something like that. And therefore, I think it's safe to assume that we can expect this game to have better updates and better networking in the future. However, that's only my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree. And so, in closing, I'd have to say that my main problems with this game are kinda technical, the pathing isn't exactly stellar, and the lobby system leaves a lot to be desired, but in my opinion, the pros of absolutely beautiful graphics, music, and tech tree, awesome zoom levels, adjustable user interface, and simplified and customizable hotkeys means that I would recommend this game to just about anybody. If these technical issues are going to keep you from enjoying the game, I would say don't buy it. But I think that for many players who play it kinda casually, or who just want to play single player even, or who are excited about finally getting farms that are the same size as the buildings which you drop off their resources at, it's really not that big of an issue, and I would definitely recommend it for you. Anyways, that's all for this one, guys. If you're new to the channel, I'd encourage you to stick around because I have a plethora of Age of Empires videos, and I'm going to be making several Age of Empires 1 Definitive Edition tutorials in the future. Thanks for watching, I hope that you found this review useful in deciding whether or not to get this game, and I'll see you later.